Hi, welcome to my channel for first-time users and welcome back to my channel for returning users. I'm Dr. D. Some of you who followed me on my old channel may recognize this as the very location where I did my very first YouTube video. If you'd like to see a redo of that video, I re-uploaded to this channel. It's called, backed by popular demand, the original Screaming Professor video. So check that out, it's the first video I ever made. But we're not going to be doing any screaming right now in this video. Instead, I wanted to talk to all of you about something that I think is very germane for those of you that are PhD students getting ready to become professors, or people that are maybe thinking about becoming PhD students, maybe thinking about becoming PhD students. And so what we're going to talk about in this video for the next few minutes is basically 5 tips and tricks to help you land your first academic job. And so the first thing that I really want to emphasize with you is, in order to get a good academic job, understand exactly what the odds are of getting that job. Okay? Different fields have very, very different odds. So I have a friend who is a history professor, and she was telling me that when she went on the job market the first time, like 10 years ago, there were only 2 tenure track positions in history in the entire United States. 2. And of course, history is like any other field. You know, there's people that are American history, European history, Renaissance history, etc. So you had to be a good match for that as well. It's not like it was just 2. And you think about that, just 2 positions in the entire United States, and you've got hundreds, if not thousands, of people graduating with PhDs in history wanting to get academic jobs in the United States. So understand what your odds are. Now, on the other hand, I know when I went on the job market the first time, I figured that the odds of getting a job, you know, for management or some sort of related discipline was about 1%. So I knew that I needed to apply to at least 100 jobs to make sure that I had something. Okay? Now you're probably wondering, like, where do you even figure out these odds, right? Well, the first place you want to go would be to check with your advisor. Chances are, if someone's your advisor, that's a relatively powerful faculty member and is probably somebody who sits on hiring committees. So when you sit on a hiring committee, and I do this, I've done this now, sitting on faculty hiring committees for, gosh, like 6 years. I know how many people apply to a position at my university, and I know how many offers we're going to make. So I've got a pretty good idea right off the bat what the odds are of someone getting a job when they apply. Okay? So your advisor should be able to tell you that. If your advisor can't, there are plenty of faculty who sit on hiring committees at a university. Feel free to ask them. You don't have to ask them specifics, but just say, you know, what does a job market look like? What do you think the odds are? And these odds change from year to year, by the way. So one year, I think it was the second year I was out of my PhD, and I was teaching in Los Angeles. It was the second year there, and like all of a sudden there were like a ton of positions in organizational behavior. So if you had a PhD in OB, you probably had a much better chance of getting a job than you would normally. Now, COVID has really messed things up like crazy. You've got a lot of faculty that aren't going to move, and you've got a lot of positions that are not opening up simultaneously. So the job market's really tricky these past couple of years. Another place that you can kind of figure out what the job market odds are, you know, it's not exactly perfectly real time, but you can also talk to senior PhD students who've probably defended their thesis and have already procured that job. You can ask them, well, how many jobs did you apply to? You know, what was that process like? Talk to them. I was very fortunate. In my PhD program, a lot of the older students or more senior students went ahead and actually did like little workshops for us. You know, they'd spend like a half an hour telling us, okay guys, you know, I applied to, you know, 150 schools and I got 3 offers, and this is what the offers were looking like. And they were very open with us. So it gave me, even though I went to the first one of these, I was just a first year PhD student, I went to them every single year. So I had a pretty good feeling for what the odds of my getting a job were once I hit the job market. So understand what the odds are. And again, one other thing I would advise you to consider is understanding how restricting yourself geographically can really hurt your chances. Okay? So one of the best PhD students that my program ever graduated, she was brilliant, I mean everything was just great. She had to have a job in Paris because her husband lived there. And so despite being an excellent scholar, there just weren't very many openings at good schools in Paris that particular year, so she took a job at really not a very good school. But you know, her family commitments were more important, and I understand that. So understanding what your jobs are. Now, at the same time, if you're willing to go anywhere in the world, you have much greater chances because it's a much wider net that you can cast trying to get that first job. Okay, so understanding the actual chances of getting a job. Now, the second thing I want to tell you is get that first job. Okay, the most important thing that you need to be doing as a PhD student, especially as you're getting up there, towards your dissertation stage, is get an offer letter in hand that is signed. Why is this so important? When you're trying to get your committee together for your defense, probably you've got really good faculty on that committee, and they're going to have a ton of competing conflicts. They're going to be on committees, they're going to be doing exec ed, they're going to be doing all sorts of stuff. And your defense is probably not the highest thing on their priority list, especially when you're dealing with what they call opponents, external examiners, external advisors, etc. However, this can lead to the fact that you could pretty much have your thesis written and ready to defend. I had one colleague who didn't have a job offer. He finished the thesis first, but he didn't actually apply for the market. He focused so much on the thesis. And it wound up taking his committee an entire year to get together to actually do the defense. And the defense was a cakewalk, right? He was ready to go. There was no problem. But their schedules were very complicated, and so therefore that really held him up for a whole year in his career. Get that offer letter in hand. Now, by the same token, I notice when you get that offer letter in hand, your committee will be normally pretty good about, okay, we need to go ahead and prioritize because this student needs their PhD finished so that they can go ahead and go onto the job market. And go ahead and take that first position. So they're going to find a way to be there. The other thing I've noticed sitting through lots and lots and lots of PhD defenses is that the corrections are usually much milder because of the fact they want to make sure you get that job. So I saw one candidate who she had a job offer in hand. She was going to have to be in a different country in 60 days. Her thesis was kind of a train wreck. But they said, okay, these are all the things you got to do. You got 45 days to do it. Go ahead and get your job. Congratulations. So getting that first job is so, so important. Okay, I'd prioritize that over everything. And remember, you can always change jobs later if you're not happy. But the worst thing you can do is be stuck as a PhD student, in perpetuity. The next thing we want to talk about are the types of jobs. So think about what's important to you and what kind of an academic do you want to be. Every university has different pros and cons. Now, let's say that you're the kind of PhD student that, has a real knack for research, and maybe you even enjoy it, and you've got a great relationship with your advisor, you got a ton of collaborators by the time you're in your 4th or 5th year. That's great. And if you really want to go for those, R1, FT 100 business schools where, it's all about research because that's what you're good at and that's your passion, go for that. Seriously, go for that. Your pay is going to be, probably quite good. You have a lot of opportunities there. Now, you do know once you get to a research-oriented school, your entire career is based on your ability to do research until you get tenure. They say publish or perish. So if you like teaching, they always say at the research-oriented schools, great teaching won't necessarily get you promoted, and bad teaching won't necessarily get you fired. So your entire livelihood is based upon your ability to do research. And all disciplines have this issue with revise and resubmits and all this other kind of stuff. So if you can't get enough research out in your 5, 6, 7 year timeline for tenure, you'll probably be fired from a good research school. And I believe at the top research schools, only about 25% to about 30% of faculty get tenure the first time. And if you don't get tenure the first time, normally you get fired and you have to move on somewhere else. Unless, of course, I've heard of cases where they really like the person, and then they maybe give them a couple extra years, they give them a sabbatical or something to work it out. But that's the research, and if that's the path you want to go, you rock that. Okay? There's other schools where they're more teaching focused. You may have research responsibilities, or you may not, kind of depending on what school you're teaching at and what that looks like. But the teaching focused schools, if you really love teaching, you love being in the classroom, go for that. And I've been at 2 different teaching schools that are very different. The thing that I like about the teaching schools is, one, I love teaching, but the other thing is you really have a lot of academic freedom at a teaching school. You can publish in almost any journal you want. You can publish things that have meaning to you. That's the path that I've kind of chosen, and I'm very happy with that. There's other schools where the faculty have more of a role in running the university, so they have very heavy administrative loads. Okay, so if you'd like to be an academic, but also some sort of an academic manager or a leader of faculty, or work, in university administration because you want to move up the hierarchy to become a dean or something like that, there's also schools that offer opportunities like that. And that's another really interesting career path. So you have these kind of three mainstream career paths that appeal to very different types of personalities. And I don't think that there's a right or a wrong answer. Same thing in terms of geography, where you teach, that'll impact the career opportunities. One of the PhD faculty in my program made a comment. He said, well, when you get out of here, do you want to go, to a top research school and, be working, late at night and crying in your cubicle because you got a rejection on a paper? Or do you want to be the kind of faculty member that, is teaching in Marseille or Montpellier, that's the south of France, a beautiful area, and you can sit and watch the sunset while you learn to play the guitar? Those are personal choices, and there's not a right or wrong answer here. It's what matters to you. Okay? So there are some other non-conventional career paths to consider. There's also the postdoc opportunity. And a postdoc is different than, the first three opportunities that I mentioned, administration, research, and teaching. Ideally you get those as tenure track positions. And tenure track, what that means is, you do whatever the standards are for your university, for research, teaching, administrative loads, whatever those standards look like. And if you do your job and you do it well, then ideally within 5, 6, 7 years, whatever that time frame looks like, you then have a job for life. You cannot be fired unless you commit some sort of an egregious moral hazard, like sexually harassing a student, committing a felony, something like that. But in terms of professional stuff, you don't actually have to worry about getting fired. Now, there are a lot of schools you've probably read, especially the small teaching colleges, that are closing due to financial constraints, and that's not getting fired, that's getting laid off. It does happen. There are a lot of these schools closing, so just keep that in mind. So some other pathways that you can look for are postdoc positions, postdoctoral positions. And these are jobs where you're probably not going to get paid a lot. And postdoc positions are normally from somewhere between 1 and 3 years. And that gives you time to continue working on your research. Okay? Postdocs can be anywhere. In fact, it could even be in the same place where you finished your PhD. I know in my PhD program, for example, there were students that would be there for like 5 years, and they finished their thesis, and their advisor wants to keep them around for another year to wrap up a project, so they're offered a postdoc position. Their advisor works with them for another year or two to finish a couple of great publications, so that when they enter the job market, they have a really, really strong research pipeline. That is another option to consider. I don't like the postdoc option. I consider more of a last resort for a couple of reasons. One, when you're a postdoc, you are totally dependent on that faculty member. So let's say you don't go to your own state, your own university as a postdoc, but you go somewhere else. What that means is that faculty member is hosting you at that other university. That person has a budget, and they have found some sort of a way to support you financially. Your entire livelihood is dependent on that person. If that person is a jerk, you're in big trouble because you're not teaching, so you can't really be evaluated on that. Everything depends on doing what that professor wants you to do research-wise. And if you don't like that kind of research, or you have a different way of viewing things, well, that's too bad. You don't really have a choice. Administration is not really a thing. You don't really have any rights as a postdoc. And if that faculty member decides to stop funding you, tough luck. Okay? So I don't like the postdoc option. Now, it can be useful, again, if you want to try to go ahead and get some great research out there so that you can enter the job market and maybe get a better position than you would otherwise. And also getting lots and lots of papers kind of ready to start sending out once you get your tenure track position. And it can really enhance your network. You can work with some great scholars because it's pretty good faculty members that have a budget to pay for a postdoc. So you're going to get to work with some great scholars. So it could be a great opportunity, but again, shoot, that's the light that went out. And I'm a starving YouTube creator in addition to being a starving faculty member, and that means that I don't pay my electricity bill sometime. Let me turn that light on, and I'm going to be right back. Stand by. Shoot, I can't see a thing in here. There's a little light. Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. The other type of job that you can consider is an adjunct position. Okay, adjunct is like I always say it's like the teaching equivalent of a postdoc, sort of. It's not the best comparison, but adjunct faculty are non-tenure track faculty. They are basically contract laborers. They are only paid to teach. They don't really do administrative work, and they're not expected to do research. Postdocs may have a conference budget, so you can go to conferences and things like that. An adjunct faculty member is probably not going to have a conference budget, so you're not going to really be going to conferences. You're going to be paid to teach, and then you go home. I would really advise you against seeking an adjunct appointment if you can avoid it, and here's the reason why. Let's say you take an adjunct position at a great university and you love it there and you want to stay. They'll probably never give you a tenure track position because the attitude is, if I can pay him or her so little to teach, why would I offer that person a much higher paid tenure track position? I saw this at Cal State LA all the time. We had awesome adjunct faculty with doctorates, publications, everything, and they would never offer them the tenure track position because it's more expensive. And that goes to my second point about adjuncts. Postdocs don't make a lot of money, neither do adjuncts. You're paid per class. Looking at how much adjuncts are made, I've seen ranges between $400 a course all the way up to a maximum of $5,000 per course, and then everything in the middle. And you think about how much time it takes to prep a course, to teach a course, to do the homework and the grading and all that stuff. Usually it's not even a minimum wage when you actually break it down. Additionally, you don't have any rights really as an adjunct. If there's no teaching hours for you, then your pay is basically cut. And you look at what a tenure track faculty will teach. They'll teach somewhere normally between 1 course per semester and then up to 4 courses per semester at a more teaching heavy school, right? So if you were an adjunct, teaching like that, let's say you teach 4 courses a semester, the most you're going to make is $20,000 a semester. It's really not a lot of money considering how much work you're expected to do. So I would say stay away from adjunct positions because, and by the way, that takes away from your research as well. This is a kind of a position with very little room for promotion, very little room for opportunity, and very little security, so stay away from it. I do know there are some state systems, like the Cal State system, that if you've been adjuncting for 3 years, because of the labor union, then you're guaranteed a certain number of hours per semester. But again, that's in California. It's a very high cost of living. Do you really want to go there? And then you can also consider jobs outside of academia. Maybe you're going to want to go work for public service, work for the FBI or, different kinds of opportunities, the State Department. And there's advantages to that too, right? Because if in federal service in the United States, if you have a PhD, you automatically start out at a higher pay grade. That's great. I know some people that have gone to work for, banks and things like that, consulting houses. If that is your, what you want to do with a PhD, don't tell anybody that's what you're trying to do. In fact, I would say go into academia first and then maybe switch to another career field later. And let me tell you why. The faculty members in the universities that are paying for your PhD program, because PhD, normally you have a scholarship and a stipend, so you're paid. Their attitude is that they own you and you are expected to go into academia, not into government or private practice. And I remember when I first started my PhD program, it was the first day of class, and they said, well, why are you here? And the first guy said, it was an African country, so I'm from Africa, and I'm hoping to get the PhD to learn stuff so I can go back to my home country and help alleviate poverty. And I remember the head of the PhD program started screaming at him and said, I am not paying you to alleviate poverty in your home country. You are here to become an academic. The second guy said, well, I want to be a consultant. And he said, I am not paying you to be a consultant. If your dream is to be a consultant, then get out. The third guy said, well, he was already a professor in his home country, and he was, the PhD would help his career. And the guy said, okay, that's fine. And when he got to me, I said, oh, I want to be a researcher. He gave it the big thumbs up. He was so happy. There was another girl in my PhD program. She was brilliant, had all the good stuff going for her. But, she kept saying that all she wanted to do was be a consultant. She didn't want to be an academic. She wrote a great thesis. That committee just would never convene to defend that thesis. It should have taken her 4 years to get out because it's how long it took her to write the thesis. And I think she defended in year 8. In the meantime, her opportunities, floating around with not exactly a PhD and not exactly doing research were very limited. So if consulting is your passion, don't tell anybody. Or any other thing besides that committee, don't tell anybody. Okay. A lot of people don't anticipate how long it takes to actually prep for the job market. So let me give an example from management. Every job market is different. History, finance. I know finance. I think their job market opens in January. Management, it tends to open like in June, sometimes late May. But before you even get to that late May, and you want to do this a year out. So my PhD I finished in 4 years. So that means in year 3, towards the end of year 3, I was starting to prep for the job market. So I knew in May I need to actually start applying for jobs. But before May, I had to actually do the prep for applying for the jobs. That meant getting the letters of recommendation from the professors. And professors are busy. It may take them a couple of months to get those letters. Now what most of my faculty did said, write me the letter that you want, I'll tweak it and then sign it. That's perfect. Okay? But even that process took a while because they're busy. It's going to take you a while to write your cover letters. You may need a teaching statement or a research statement, and some schools want teaching and research statements. Different universities want different numbers of recommendation letters. Some want just 1 rec letter, some want 5. So there's a lot of variety in the kinds of documents you need to have. Some universities want you to have a job market paper. Sometimes a job market paper is a published paper. Sometimes it's a paper that you're trying to publish. Sometimes you need a teaching presentation. So you need to get all that stuff kind of ready before, a couple months before you even start applying for jobs. Okay? Otherwise, you're going to be applying for jobs and you can't finish your applications because you don't have everything, especially those reference letters. The other thing is, it takes a long time to finish individual applications. Now, sometimes an application is as simple as you just send the resume and they'll do like a screening and then they'll write you back and see if they want to meet with you more. I know in the field of management, the academy management has a job market, kind of a job fair. And a lot of the universities will let you do abbreviated applications. So you might just do a cover letter and a CV, or sometimes just a CV. And if they're interested in meeting with you at the academy of management, they'll write you back and invite you to send a full application. But if they're not interested in you in the academy of management, you don't send anymore, and you don't waste the time sending a full application to them later on. Okay, so that's another option. That's another way to look at it. But anyhow, a lot of these applications take a long time, especially if you're looking at public universities, state schools. It won't be something as simple as sending a cover letter and sending a CV, but they'll have their own mainframe where you're basically copying and pasting portions of your CV into these mainframes, and it can take sometimes as long as 2 hours to finish an application. Okay? So what I wound up doing in my case is, May started, I went to the Academy of Management job boards. I started looking, there were the first few kind of jobs trickling in, and I started applying. And once June June kind of starts rolling around, even July, I started to realize, okay, there's lots of jobs going on and I kind of needed to do this full time. So I would get up in the morning, I would work out, I would get home by 10:30, 11 o'clock, I'd have a quick lunch, and then I'd spend from about 1 to 5 every day, starting in May, June, and then all the way up to about July, doing nothing but job applications. And then I went to the job interviews at the Academy of Management, and then there's kind of a secondary job market after the Academy of Management, September, October, and I still kept applying for jobs because I wanted to make sure I had something. Okay. It takes a long time. Don't put this off to the last minute. Also, don't restrict yourself to just one conference. So in management, we look at the Academy of Management Job Fair. That's the big one, right? But in management, there's also Akadeus, which is a job database. European Group for Work Studies, EGOS, also has a job market. European Academy of Management has a very small job market. And there's others that you want to be looking at. And sometimes you just need to look at the individual schools and see what their offerings are. There were a few schools that I applied to that didn't have a job posting on the Academy of Management or anything else, but it had it on those individual school websites. So if there's somewhere you really want to go, then look at the actual individual websites. Okay? But this takes a long time, and we're talking hours and hours and hours over several months. And you may, if you don't get a job the first time, they want to check the secondary job market. So in business, you'd start looking in November, December, January to see if there's any leftover positions that you can maybe take. Okay? But this takes a long time. Don't underestimate it. That also means that you've got to have a lot of your thesis done a year out, because there's going to be several months where you're not working on the thesis. You're just going to be doing job applications. This takes a long time. Okay? And then actually prep for the job talk. Okay? I have seen a tremendous amount of diversity. So hopefully what happens is you send in your application, You have some sort of a preliminary interview, like a Skype interview or a telephone interview. Most of them are Skype or Zoom interviews now. And that's kind of a screening interview. It'll probably be with a couple of select members from the hiring committee. And they're just going to make sure that, you're not completely crazy, right? Or just a completely bad fit, or don't say anything that you shouldn't say. Some universities, all the faculty decide, the preliminary stage. Others, it's very diverse. But you'll have that preliminary screening interview, and then you're invited to a job talk. So I know in business, we figured, when I did the odds, the first time I was in the job market, I figured I had about a 15 to 20% chance of getting a job talk, a preliminary screening interview, and that was about right. And then out of that, I figured, if I had 20, I think I had 20 or 30, Skype interviews, and out of that, I think I wound up getting invitations for like 5 or 6 job talks, best I remember. And so, what you want to communicate in the job talk itself is your fit for that particular university. And this throws people off a lot because they think, oh, I'm a great job market candidate, I can go anywhere I want, or they think I'm not a very good job market candidate, my options are limited. Don't look at yourself in terms of quality in this way. Look at yourself in terms of fit. Are you a fit for that university? And what is the hiring committee looking for? They're looking for in the short term, are you somebody that can teach certain classes that need to be filled? Okay, that's what they're looking for in the short term. In the long term, they're looking at, is this somebody that can work with on committees, and is this somebody that's going to produce a research agenda that's going to benefit this university? So they're looking at 2 different things. Okay, so think of this. When you prep for your job market talk, figure out if you're a fit. Am I a really great teacher? If so, I'm looking at a teaching university, and what classes do they teach that I could be a really good fit for? Okay, or are you looking more at a research university and saying, well, I really want to work with these scholars or participate in this research center? Or are you looking more at the administrative track and saying, you know what, I would really like to, run this research center, run this entrepreneurship center, do these kinds of duties. Ideally, you're going to have some sort of a blend of all 3, but there'll be one that you emphasize a little bit more than the other. Okay, so you keep that in the back of your mind. You'd be amazed how many candidates come and it's like, well, who do you want to work with here on the faculty? And like, I don't know. Or they'll say, well, I don't really know what your teaching requirements are, so I don't know what classes I could teach. That sends a bad message. It sends you didn't really prep. Okay, so do that first. The second thing you want to do is actually call who's ever your contact on the hiring committee and ask them what the expectations for the job talk are. There are very, very different requirements depending on where you're teaching. And I'll just tell you a little bit about some of the job talks I've been on, just to give you an idea of the diversity. I went to one university, and it was a 4-day job talk. 4 days. That's longer than anything I've ever even heard of. And you taught 2 classes, 2, not 1, but 2. You gave 2 research presentations. Then they had you do all these workshops where you were designing classes with other job market candidates from different fields, and they would observe how you work together. That was interesting. It was a fun exercise, but it was interesting. And when they were doing their hiring, I think they had like 20 or 30 people that they were all interviewing at once. Like all the faculty, that's pretty much all they did. And they had you interview with every single faculty member at the university. There was only like 80, but it was still like a 10 or 15 minute thing with every single person. This was really time consuming, really draining. Another job market talk, which is more standard that I went to, you gave 1 teaching presentation, and then you gave a 15-minute research presentation followed by 45 minutes of Q&A. You met with the department chair, you met with the dean, you met with the other faculty just to see if they like you and that you can be a good fit. I went to one where their expectation was all about executive education. They wanted you to teach executive ed seminars, and they wanted you to teach in a very specific way. My current employer, I had to give 2 teaching presentations and 1 research presentation, and then I met all the faculty in my particular department. So there's a lot of diversity here. So call whoever your contact is in the hiring committee and ask, what is it that you're expecting of me in this job talk? That'll help you get prepped. Okay? Plus it shows you're interested enough to actually care and follow up with it, get you some brownie points. Okay? Remember that during the job talk, you were being interviewed the entire time. They're going to take you out for dinner and lunch and breakfast and possibly even drinks, depending on the university. Don't be that candidate that drinks too much alcohol and then loses control of themselves. That will not get you a job offer. Don't be that candidate that thinks that because the job market people that you're talking to are like friendly, that now they're your friends and you can start telling them things that you probably wouldn't tell coworkers. So you're being interviewed the whole time. Also be very careful to ask them what the dress code is for the different phases of the interview. Okay, so I went to one school that was in the South Pacific on the other side of the world, and I had, let's see, it was a 3-day job talk, so I had to have 2 suits ready, and then there was some like cocktail hours, so I had to not have a suit, but I had to have like a sweater and a pair of khakis and stuff. So make sure that you've got enough clothes and the right kinds of clothes to show up for your particular job talk. Now in business we tend to be more dressed up, and I always tell people, especially if you're a man, wear a tie. Not wearing a suit and tie, in my opinion, is extremely disrespectful. And when somebody shows up to a job interview and I'm on the other side and they're not wearing a tie, I immediately take note of it. I think it's just inappropriate. Other fields are different. Someone told me in math that it was common for people to show up, wearing flip-flops and a dirty, torn undershirt, and that was fine. I don't know how true that is, but that's what somebody told me. So spend the time to prep for that job talk, and also that is your time to interview the people that you're looking to work with. Ask some questions like, what are the teaching, how many classes do I have to teach, what's a successful faculty member here? Ask them those kinds of questions that you need to know. And if it's in an area that you're not familiar with, especially if it's in a foreign country, they've already paid for your flight there, so try to spend a day or two like with a realtor or a real estate agent looking at houses. Shoot, I'm telling you, I really, make sure you subscribe to this channel so I can actually have lights. But it shows that you're interested if you actually check out real estate while you're there. Now the final thing is, look at these people that you're interviewing with as potential collaborators no matter what. There are several people that I've had job interviews with. I didn't take the job, but we've still kept in touch and we've written papers together, and I met them at job talks. So this is a great opportunity. Take advantage of it. Okay, so we've spoken an awful lot. Do you have any questions? Okay. I've been on the job market a couple of times, but I've also been on the hiring committees of universities at different places too. So if you have any questions, put them in the comments down below. I'm looking forward to hearing from you. And by the way, hit that subscribe button, hit the like button. I can't even afford lights. I'm such a poor faculty member, so help me out. Make me the next YouTube millionaire. Awesome. Looking forward to seeing the next videos.